Hi, Professor Vijay Raghavan. So wonderful to see you again.
Yes.
So, so everyone, my request is whoever is not speaking, if you can mute yourself, we can minimize the noise. So, welcome to TechRx. It's a monthly program being brought to you by Andhra Pradesh MedTech Zone, AMTZ, and INC, which stands for Innovation and Knowledge. Ever since the beginning of humanity, science and technologies have given us tools for social and economic change. If you really think about it, a lot of scientists spend their lifetime doing research, and it's the application of the research that brings great social and economic. So let me give you a small example. Smithsonian Magazine called the wheel a pure Homo sapien innovation. Unlike inventions like pitchfork, etc., which have been inspired by nature. So over the years, what started as a potter's wheel found its way to being wheel for a chariot, to a wheelbarrow, to windmills, to bicycles, to cars, to even roulette tables. But it's the human imagination that was sparked by the knowledge of an invention of the wheel that created so many manifestations of a single innovation. Now, our goal at TechRx is to showcase the stories of science and scientists, of their great observations, and present it across a cross section of listeners, from students to scientists, to spark the imagination of someone somewhere to apply it in the most impactful way. Today, let me introduce you to two people. The 2 minutes I'm given is not enough to share their entire bio. So here's the shortened version. First, I'd like to introduce you to my co-host, Dr. Jitendar Sharma, whose vision it is that started this program, whose medical journey includes 2 PhDs, 4 masters, experience that spans across globe from AIMS New Delhi to Uppsala Monitoring Center, Sweden, to Japan, to Australia, Harvard School of Public Health, World Bank, WHO in their headquarters in Geneva, Ministry of Health, Niti Aayog in Government of India, and that is just a part of what he has done. He has authored 2 books and over 20 research papers, and he's really led the way to set up Asia's first medical equipment manufacturing zone, Dr. APJ Kalam Institute of Technology, and Medivalley. And you'll find a lot more about these a little later. On a special note, happy birthday, Dr. Sharma. And I think this is a great way to plan a great party for your birthday to have great. So happy birthday. And next up, I'd like to introduce you to our guest of honor, Professor Vijay Raghavan, the Principal Scientific Advisor to Government of India. When I first moved to India in 2009, I've been away for 30 years and I didn't know anyone here. So I asked my friend Rohini Nilakani, who's in Bangalore, who's one of the smartest people I know. And I asked her, who's the one person I need to know so I can understand what's happening in science in India? And she said, you just need to know Vijay. And that is Dr. Vijay Raghavan, who was running National Center for Biological Sciences at that time. I went to meet him and he gave me a tour of the facility, and his pride and the way he explained the importance of developmental biology truly, for me personally, sparked a new interest in my life. And to this day, 10 years later, we have a strategic relationship with NCBS and I go there regularly. So thanks to his enthusiasm. His career spans IIT Kanpur, TIFR, California Institute of Technology. He started as a reader in TIFR in 1988 and today rose to one of the top positions in science in the country. He has dedicated his career to spreading science through education as well as public policy. I'm really thrilled to bring as my travel mates Dr. Jitendar Sharma and Professor Vijay Raghavan to take us through their insights and application that make India a global player in the research and application of science. With that, Dr. Vijay Raghavan, I would love for you to open up with your remarks.
Lakshmi ji,
Sorry.
Lakshmi ji,
Yeah,
before you open up, I am just tempted and reminded of an incident and may share if you permit.
of course.
So, Dr. Vijay Raghavan, Dr. Vijay Raghavan actually attended a meeting in which I joined, in Vigyan Bhavan NX. And that's where, when we conceptualized the work of Kalam Institute of Health Technology, he was the Secretary, Department of Biotechnology, when Kalam Institute was approved under his signature. And as Principal Scientific Advisor to Government of India, he is also the President of the Kalam Institute of Health Technology. I feel privileged that an institute founded and named after Dr. Kalam has a originator, chairperson, and a president, both of whom, which is Dr. Vijay Raghavan. It's absolutely a matter of privilege for many like me in the country to even have an iota of guidance for someone like him. Having said that, the success stories in India and across the world in medical technology is overwhelming. And therefore, we proposed this monthly series called TechRx, where Tech stands for technology and RX stands for doctor's prescription, which means a technology which can be prescribed for human development, health, and welfare becomes TechRx. And this series of talks, when we orchestrated it, of course, with your participation in going in its planning, we realized that it could be a monthly series which could have pioneers in their work, bringing innovative tools, technologies for human and scientific development and healthcare progress in India. But the champions can be from across the world. And therefore, for the benefit of audience and for Dr. Vijay Raghavan's notice, I wanted to place before him that while we are privileged to have him as the inaugural speaker of TechRx series, it will be a dedicated YouTube channel. It will be a monthly series carrying successful stories from across the world. We will have champions from across the world talking once in a month to a much larger audience, physically and virtually, on the evolution of medical technology and its application in healthcare. With that humble introduction, I take this privilege along with you to welcome Professor Vijay Raghavan, our mentor and guide in this journey.
Thank you very much, Jitendra, and thank you, Lakshmi. It's really a great pleasure and honor to be here today. Again, a very happy Independence Day to everyone, and also very happy birthday to Jitendra Sharma. Sharma and his colleagues have steered the formation and the growth of the Andhra Pradesh MedTech Zone and the Kalam Institute. It's an exemplar for all of us in the country. And, many people have said we should have many more of such zones. And I completely agree. The Niti Aayog has agreed, and there will be more such zones. But the challenge is not just having more such places, but also having more such places with the right kind of culture, the people, the leadership, and all that also remains to be duplicated, which is not as easy as building up infrastructure alone. We are, of course, going through a very difficult time all over the world at the time of COVID. And this is now something which we must look at in the context of everything else we do. What has happened towards the end of last year is the unleashing of a consequence of a spillover on the entire world. How did that happen? What does it mean to us in terms of our economic growth, in terms of our science and technology, is something which we need to examine, discuss, and translate into specific kinds of action. What happened in December 2019 or thereabouts was a virus incubated in a bat, spilled over and infected a human. And typically, such instances would end over there. That infection will not go further. But in this instance, that infection, which was transmitted to a human, was transmitted to another human, and from there to others, and so on. In other words, human to human transmission occurred. How do we know that this happened? We know that from years, decades of investment in science and technology. That has taught us that coronaviruses, the kind of virus which caused this pandemic, incubate very often in bats. They do that because they don't cause much harm to bats themselves, because the way the bat's immune system responds to the virus in an unusual manner. But the bats otherwise offer a very valuable and congenial environment for viruses to incubate. These viruses typically will stay in the bat and they will mutate with time. There are many, many kinds of coronaviruses. Those changes will be modest and random, usually causing more damage to the virus than anything else. Occasionally, these changes will result in changes in the coat proteins of the virus, which allow it not just to infect the bat, but also to infect other hosts. And that change is what took place in viruses. And we know that from studies of molecular biology of these viruses, their evolution, that this is what most likely took place. This change allows the virus to efficiently infect human cells also, and not only infect them, but to suppress aspects of their early immune response and grow rapidly and transmit from human to human. The SARS coronavirus 2 is unusual compared to, for example, the SARS virus, which was there a few years ago, in that it is multiple things. It infects both the upper and lower respiratory tracts. It can cause severe illnesses, yet it can be mild at the same time in many people it infects. It is reasonably highly transmissible and at the same time doesn't cause lethality except at a low frequency. This combination allows asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic people to spread the disease even before they are seen to have strong symptoms themselves. And the result of this is, unlike other pandemics, such as the flu pandemic of 1918, we cannot isolate people on the basis of their symptoms. We must isolate people on the basis of their contacts, those who have symptoms, or on the basis of them having the disease even though they have no symptoms. That too is made possible by science because we have diagnostic tests which can test for the presence of the virus or test if you have had the virus by seeing whether you have antibodies in your blood. And you can have ways by which you can digitally identify those who have been in contact with others who have had the disease and isolate them. So digital contact tracing is very, very important. The exit from the disease, however, would come only from drugs and vaccines. Drugs against viruses are very difficult because viruses typically minimally use their own machinery and maximally use our machinery to replicate, and therefore a specific drug is very, very difficult. Viruses also amplify enormously, and therefore drugs must act early on, otherwise they will not be very effective. So drugs pose a challenge, but drugs actually are very likely to come up steadily because the kinds of efforts which are going on, people are trying a lot. Typically, you get a drug which is modestly effective, and then you add other drugs which are also modestly effective and get a cocktail which is effective. Right now, we have dexamethasone, for example, which is a steroid and an anti-inflammatory and can greatly mitigate the consequences of the disease. Drugs which have effects at earlier stage are something people are trying, including in India. Vaccines are the other way out of the disease, and vaccines, however, need to be given to normal people on a very large scale, and therefore you cannot tolerate side effects which can cause serious problems. And therefore, testing a vaccine is as important as developing one. And there are a very large number of vaccines being developed all over the world right now, with a few of them in clinical trials and a few of them in late-stage clinical trials. So it looks like we will, all signs are positive, it looks like we will have vaccines sometime soon. But while we wait for drugs and vaccines, it is very important for us to practice all the requirements which can actually by themselves also crush the virus, have face masks when in company, maintain physical distancing, practice hygiene, and ensure we help everyone else do the same. This is not easy, of course, because many of us live in very difficult circumstances, in very crowded circumstances, but this is important that we try our best to do. So this is the roadmap of what the disease has taken. But the disease has also resulted in something rather dramatic. And that is, it has completely unraveled the tight thread, tight knots, as it were, which intertwine politics, economics, society, science and technology, and our future. These were tied together in such a manner earlier that it became difficult to imagine a world in which they would be unraveled. But today that knot has been unraveled, and therefore this is a time for us to ask how we can put it together in new and more effective ways. That is the big challenge which faces us. What has happened is, and we have seen this during the pandemic, that for one, global supply chains have broken. And that is characterized by what we saw at the start of the pandemic in India, where we didn't have access to PPE, N95 masks, ventilators, and so on and so forth. But as you know, particularly at the Karam Institute and at the Andhra Pradesh MedTech Zone, how all of you came together to make all of these items which were not made in India, and also not only do that, but do it in a manner which now the country can export as well as provide for ourselves. So the same thing happened with testing kits for diagnosis of various kinds and for various kinds of treatment practices in hospital. So this is an example of how, when there is a shared sense of purpose, different people put aside their biases of what to do and what not to do, came together and focused on solving a problem. And this is absolutely astounding what all of you have done. And this is something now which we must keep and go together. What is the way forward? And I'll end with that. The way forward comes from looking at our past. If we look at our past right from the onset of the first industrial revolutions to the explosion, for example, of the atomic bomb at the Trinity site in New Mexico in 1942. It is absolutely amazing how we had a situation where humans, 1945, we had a situation where humans felt they could master the entire world and determine what is good for all of us. So we had a sense of overconfidence, a sense of hubris that science and technology could provide the means as long as society set the goals to achieve them. And those goals were set by political leaders, social leaders, predominantly in the industrialized world. The result of such an approach was that we saw enormous progress, as it were, in pockets, and this progress came at the cost of substantially exploiting the environment, exploiting countries other than the industrialized countries, exploiting workforce, and resulting in what we've seen as climate change. A lot of good came out of this in terms of people being lifted out of poverty all over the world, but a lot of damage also to the environment and to the earth came down. So now we need to look at a way, having become the controllers of the future of the planet, to see how we can go ahead with sustainable development, look at environment and climate change, and yet make sure that we don't exploit in any way each other or the environment. Is that feasible? It is difficult, but feasible. And for that, it requires our approach to energy generation must change. We must have renewable, nuclear, and a portfolio of energy which minimally causes damage to the environment and leaves a minimal carbon footprint. We must utilize that energy to make products in a manner which again has a substantial low carbon footprint. There will be many aspects which we import, but many need to be manufactured locally. And we must embrace technologies such as new technologies such as artificial intelligence to improve our processes and decision-making systems and have a very large part of our young people involved through skilling, training and education. All this is feasible, but it requires that we don't slip back into a mentality of silos, but actually work to ensure that we show an example to ourselves and to the world on how to go forward. So I'll stop here now. Thank you very, very much, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Raghavan. One of the things I would love for you to answer is you are in a very important position in India. So, what is the role that a public-private partnership and academia, how can they all come together, and what are some of the things we can work on that can really leapfrog some of the legacy systems and put India on a global map?
Thank you. A public-private partnership is absolutely vital for us to go ahead. For the simple reason, I mean, there are multiple reasons. One is that if you look at the amount of investment by industry in research, it's less than 30% or about 30% of our total R&D investment. In the developed countries, it's usually about 70% and not 30%. And therefore, industry investment in R&D needs to go up. But the other side of it is that it's not easy for industry to do that because for two reasons. One, there's enormous risk in you have to compete with the big companies all over the world who each invest more than, for example, the big ones, than the US National Science Foundation's entire budget. So for them to compete, a partnership is very important, where industry partners with academia and with state and central government to mitigate the risk, talented people in enterprises in our universities, the availability of infrastructure and the availability of land, all three together can greatly mitigate industry risk, and public-private partnership can come about in even cutting-edge frontier technologies, let alone the ones where you need to go to create a solution.
So, can you give some examples of fields like is it developmental biology, genetics? What are some of the fields in which we can really invest? You talked about artificial intelligence. What are 3 or 4 specific fields you think we should invest in a lot of resources?
Well, the challenge comes in defining a field from the following point, but yet we must focus. What the pandemic has shown is, irrespective of field, the value of different kinds of specializations, of mathematicians, of statisticians, of chemists, of physicists, of engineers, their training allows you to come across and solve a problem which you had not anticipated. So if you want to solve problems which you haven't anticipated, you need diversity, not focus. That's something very important. And that should be the fundamental bottom of the pyramid. So we need to expand our research diversity rather than contract. We need to fund research in our state universities, such as in Andhra Pradesh, enormously rather than contract. That's why the new National Research Foundation, which the Prime Minister announced today, is very, very important, because that will take funding of research to a broader section, or literally the entire country, in multiple ways. So that's the foundation. Now, at the other end, if we want to look at what we need to invest, where should we focus on big items, we must keep in mind 2 aspects. One is our societal needs, and therefore health, agriculture, education would be very important areas of partnership and focus. But the other point we need to keep in mind, if we want to be, truly successful in this, we must also be not only nationally competitive and successful, but globally so. That requires an assessment of what are the areas where we can scale rapidly. We can scale rapidly in areas which are anchored on the cyber physical, on computer science, and on mathematics, because that we can exponentially grow and young people can excel. And that has a strong anchor in manufacturing today. Areas of manufacturing also we can grow relatively fast. Areas of manufacturing which are deep tech, which we missed the bus a long time ago, will take a long time to catch up, or we need innovative ways to catch up. Thank you.
Great. Dr. Sharma, would you like to ask any questions? Dr. Sharma, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Professor Vijay Raghavan. Sir, are you there? Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, let me tell you that on the 16th of March, Professor Vijay Raghavan called a meeting. In less than 35 minutes, he told me to ensure ventilator production stats. I contested on the evidence we had at that time from our engineering streams and manufacturing streams, and he overruled it. And he said to go ahead with the plan of manufacturing 15,000 ventilators, 50 lakh RT-PCR diagnostic kits, N95 masks at least 50,000 a day, and PPE kits, IR thermometers, pulse oximeters, everything in 4 months. And whatever be the support, he will ensure that that is given for our rapid scale of manufacturing. Today we are safe because we just followed what was told to us on 16th of March by Professor Vijay Raghavan. Today we are making each of those products in the volumes that are anticipated and expected. But let me tell you what happens in a model like AMTZ. It is not PPP, it is reverse PPP. In a PPP, it's a private company that invests money because there is the fiscal space does not allow investment to come in that quantum, such as for building highways, and it's private company that takes the revenue. In science, what we have done is RPPP. It is the government through AMTZ like institution that invests on rapid scale up manufacturing capabilities, electromagnetic interference lab or gamma radiation plant. And it's the government that invests on the scientific infrastructure, which is milked for quantum jump in production and revenues by the private industry. So it is PPP, but just the mirror image of any other non-science PPP. And to evolve this PPP, Professor Vijay Raghavan has been with us even during construction when it was going around wearing a helmet. But today, there is no product from a superconducting magnet of an MRI to world's second cardiac robotic surgery system. And we'll see some bioorgans coming in next 5 minutes with Professor Jordan Wallace joining us from Australia. All that happening in one campus only because of RPPP, the reverse PPP. Because for science, we need somebody to back up, somebody to give that confidence, support, fiscal space, and technological guidance, as Professor Vijay Raghavan did for the medical equipment manufacturing for COVID with AMTZ. And we need private sector to actually use and exploit that infrastructure in rapid scale up. So I just wanted to share this comment and give an idea of the kind of PPP that actually science and technology needs. But with that, over to Professor Vijay Raghavan again for any additional comments.
Thank you, Jitendra. That was very well put. Indeed, what you have stated really points to a very important direction, that quite often it is the articulation of goals. If they are clear, then you find a clarity of means to achieve those goals. The situation otherwise, in peacetime, as it were, is that the goals are not articulated, and people, industry, academia, tech zones, and so on, become better and better at perfecting the means, but they don't link to goals because the goals often are not defined. So a clarity of goals and a perfection of means are both needed for us to go ahead.
Great. There's a question from the audience about how do we bridge the gap between science and society? How do we make sure more members of the society not just understand but actually implement, apply science?
You know, one of the problems in the ever-present gap between science and society is scientists want to be left alone, and they used to argue that the benefits of science to society will go by osmosis in some manner. Uh, Yet science is funded by society, and society, instead of leaving scientists alone, constantly asks for the fruits of research. So today's pandemic has changed that situation. There is a much greater bond between science and society because magically almost, society is asking not just for the fruits of research, but of research itself. They want people to sort out the disease and everything else. So there is an unusual appreciation of research as well as the fruits of research. And among scientists, there's a universal desire to deliver to society. This bond must be kept as we go ahead. It's not easy, but there is a chance that we can do it.
Yeah. There's another question from the audience about how do we encourage more women to be part of STEM?
Well, this is the very critical situation, and I'm constantly faced with this in terms of decision-making groups, which may even have women in them, or a mixture of men and women, of course, but they constantly, at leadership talks, at meetings, and so on, look to pretty much having male panelists or male members. Unless we increasingly have in leadership positions in talks uh, women more and more, we're not going to have women aspiring to leadership positions. They will assume that those are close to them because the people they see are not people like them. That needs to change. So I would urge that your next talk you have next several talks, make sure you have women and make sure that the audience behind Jitendra also has at least 30% women there. Then we can make a dramatic change.
Great. And actually, Professor Vijay Raghavan, I want to say that I was talking about you showing me NCBS, and one of the things we have done for the last 10 years consistently is find amazing women scientists from NCBS as Inc. fellows. And it's really thanks to you. I mean, NCBS is filled with fantastically smart women scientists. I mean, a lot of credit goes to you, and we've consistently showcased them all over the globe. Here is the last question, maybe before I turn it over to Dr. Sharma, is, what are some of the critical R&D assets that we can strengthen in India, be it, government-funded research or IP creation, I mean, protection of IP, or any other things, any other facets that are necessary to accelerate science in India?
Well, the answer to that question is actually best given by Jitendra because the AMTZ and the Kalam Institute and what all the efforts done exemplify the search for this solution. And one of the things I learned, at that first meeting with Jitendra, that meeting incidentally was chaired by Dr. Chidambaram. And I came to that meeting. It was a meeting in which the Department of Commerce was also there. And I came from another meeting. I was going to yet another one. And I came with the view that, oh my God, here I'm coming to another meeting. At the end of that meeting, I told Dr. Chidambaram, well, I don't know what I've got from this meeting, but I've met Jitendra Sharma. And what Jitendra said at that meeting was something very important, which is, he said, if you take any complex product which you import, and you open it up and you look at its parts, you will find that you can actually make more than 90% of those products as well over here. There will be some key product which you can't make. But our managers, when we talk about self-reliance, talk about making that whole black box here. And that, when you pose that as a challenge, you go all over the place. But if you say that I want to make that small component which I can't make and source all the others here, then you've broken down the challenge into something much more tractable and more valuable. All the other small products which you use are usable in multiple other situations. So we must build a much wider base of manufacturing linked to our science and technology labs, where the core key components which we just cannot make here, we might import for now, but we work on fundamental R&D to make those, and others we import. Now, it's not that we, can make everything in the world, because no country is an island. But we must become a dominant player in a supply chain, and not only ones which can assemble quality products or enhance value and then export again. And that goes for chemistry, for biology, for manufacturing, for everything.
With that, Dr. Sharma, it's a great lead into you to talk about AMTZ and Dr. Wallace and all the things that are going on. So on to you, Dr. Sharma.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I just again share a very practical example just to concur with what Professor Raghavan just mentioned. When we started ventilators, we realized that we don't have four things: the motors, the turbines, the valves, and the sensors. And let me tell you, these four pieces actually were cause of a great concern. The valves for all ventilators in India are imported. The sensors are imported. The motors are imported, and turbines are imported. That's that 10% or in any product in medical technology. In the remaining 90% that we can make, 60% of the components are sector agnostic. So there is a dialysis machine in which we use a garden hose pipe. These are sector agnostic products. They have a much bigger market and a much bigger viability formula behind. And the 30% out of 90 are product specific things which we have the ability to make. And if, like a horoscope, we can break every medical technology product into these three parts: the sector agnostic that we can make, the product specific that we can make, and the product specific that we can't make. And we create infrastructure around that 10%. We make our investments cost effective and incremental in impact. And that's what we have been doing. So just to conclude the question that you asked, today, microelectronics, lasers, biologics, and 3D printing are four dimensions on which if we can invest on platforms, on infrastructure, that 10% that we don't make, we will start making, because rest 90% is not the problem. So with that, I'm glad to inform you that out of those four segments, which we derived in a very evidence-based manner, on 3D printing, AMTZ hosts one of world's largest 3D printing centers, and certainly world's largest 3D printing center for medical technology. It's a huge 3D printing center by itself. Now we have gone to one step ahead. We have gone into 3D bioprinting, and Professor Jordan Wallace, who is joining us from University of Wollongong, Australia, I was privileged to visit his campus 2 years ago. And we realized that there is a lot of commonality. While AMTZ is specializing in 3D printing, Professor Jordan Wallace and his center, SS in University of Wollongong, Australia, specializes in biodyes and bioprinting. And we realize that if we can combine these powers, we can actually have 2 to 3 years down the line cost-effective, affordable bioorgans. And if organs are developed from the cells, from the biology of the patient, the problem of organ rejection is not there, because it's your own cells which can be 3D printed. To what extent we can do that is in future, but I'll take this opportunity to welcome Professor Jordan Wallace and extending our heartfelt good wishes to him and his team on India's Independence Day, and also introducing him to Professor Vijay Raghavan, who leads the scientific endeavors on behalf of multiple institutions, ministries, and efforts in the country on behalf of everyone. I have a very small video for Professor Jordan Wallace, who has actually visited AMTZ number of times, including with his brand ambassador, who is Adam Gilchrist, and our brand ambassador, who is Virendra Sehwag. So we are two cricket-loving nations who try to drag cricket in everything that we do. I will request the host to take us through a 2.5-minute video of AMTZ, and then request Professor Jordan Wallace to play his 2-minute video and make few remarks. And then we will request Professor Vijay Raghavan to launch the course Fire, which is the first 3D bioprinting online course that perhaps India has ever hosted. With that, over to host to play the AMTZ video. Professor Jordan Wallace, over to you. You can take the floor, and whenever you say, the host will start your video.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity of joining with you all today, and happy Independence Day and happy birthday to Jitendar as well. It's a real privilege for us to be able to join and to listen to Professor Vijay Raghavan today, and everyone else who has spoken. I've certainly learned a lot. So we might just roll with the video, which introduces our environment and facilities, and then I just have a few short PowerPoints to present, particularly in the area of bioprinting. So I'll hand back to the host.
I'm Gordon Wallace, and I'm based here in Wollongong, the university's Innovation Campus. We host the headquarters of a National Centre of Excellence in Advanced Materials Research, ACES, a multidisciplinary centre with nodes at 8 Australian universities. Within ACES, we have assembled a world-class research team, discovering and developing new materials for use in energy and in health. Wollongong, we also provide the headquarters for the Australian National Fabrication Facility Materials. And as part of that, we have developed TRICEP, a translational facility accelerating commercial opportunities in 3D bioprinting. We have brought together process science, 3D printing capabilities to enable the creation of bespoke metal or polymer structures. Using 3D printing, intricate components can be created layer by layer from the ground up. We use these 3D fabrication technologies to create components for next generation bioprinters. We are in fact printing printers. The team and facilities at TRICEP has enabled us to embark on a range of projects wherein 3D bioprinting is being used to tackle medical challenges. This involves the development of a number of customized ink formulations and 3D bioprinting hardware. These include the Excel handheld device to print bioinks containing stem cells directly into the knee for cartilage regeneration. The iFix pen is an innovative printing technology used to print bioinks directly into the eye for wound repair. The 3D Pict is a printer to create 3D structures containing islet cells for transplantation to treat diabetes. Our Trojan horse concept protects the cells in a 3D scaffold that is loaded with other cell types to regulate the immune system. The 3D ALIC is a 3D printer used to create a living ear to treat patients with microtia. And in parallel, we've designed and developed the 3D Genie to create prosthetic ears using synthetic materials. Progress in these projects has also led to the design and development of a 3D bioprinter for research and training purposes, the 3D Ready. This comes complete with tutorial packages to get the user using 3D printing as quickly as possible. Used to progress a number of collaborative projects with AMTZ, particularly in the area of 3D printed ears and 3D. Together, we have an innovative training course in 3D bioprinting, a course that runs with area. The course working with end users, including clinicians, regular policymakers, if we have effective transition.
Over to you, Professor Wallace. Before we request Professor Vijay Raghavan to bless the launch of the 3D bioprinting course, but over to you.
Okay, just a second. Bear with me. Can you see that, Jitendar?
Yes, we can see that. We can see that.
Thank you. And again, thank you. Sorry for the little hiccups in the video there, but just to emphasize that we're here in Wollongong this afternoon in Australia, about 80 kilometres south of Sydney. We're speaking to you. And as you can see from this shot, there's some similarities between the Novotel, which is right in the middle of this picture in Wollongong, and the Novotel that we've often stared at in Vizag. Our campus, our innovation campus, is 200 metres from the beach in this vicinity. It's a campus which has been built to do multidisciplinary research, and we've already heard from some people the importance of that integration of multidisciplinary research under the one roof. We bring together chemists and biologists and physicists, materials engineers and mathematicians, all to look at some very big fundamental problems. But we've always had an eye towards turning those fundamental discoveries into real applications. And so we've built this facility to enable that pipeline to occur. And the most recent development to that is TRICEP, which is a translational facility for 3D bioprinting to develop bioinks up to the scale where they can be commercialized, or customized bioprinter prototypes up to the scale where they can be commercialized. And I think it's this common desire that we have here in Wollongong with our colleagues at AMTZ, which is really our strongest bond. And that common desire is to take fundamental, exciting fundamental discoveries and turn them into real applications, particularly in the health sector. So within this facility, we have a number of projects that I've mentioned in the video, but also these projects have enabled us to build up a network of clinicians over many years, and to build a body of expertise that really led to the collaborative things we do with AMTZ at the moment, particularly the 3D printed ears project with Dr. Payal Mukherjee, who's based here in Sydney and funded by the Australia India Council, and our 3D printers for islet cell transplantation, a new exciting project we're building collaborative links in. And that collaboration in those research areas has really led to our thoughts around developing this course that we're launching today. It's very much had input from our colleagues at AMTZ and my team here in Wollongong. And it covers or introduces at least the candidates to all of the aspects of this highly interdisciplinary area, right through from the building of collaborative teams that effectively network, which is essential in this area, through the ink formulations and the hardware and the introduction of living cells into those structures, which is so necessary for all of the clinical applications that we're being challenged with. And the second part of the course actually introduces the candidates to some of those clinical applications, and that is 3D bioprinting directly into the knee with stem cells for cartilage regeneration, 3D printed ears project, either a living ear, which is regrowing that cartilage in the shape of an ear, or prosthetic ears, a project that's progressing very well through our collaborations with AMTZ and clinicians associated with AMTZ. And then the islet cell transplantation project I mentioned. And the final practical topic we cover in the course is in wound healing. We work very closely with a clinician here in Australia in that area also. The actual structure of the course is a series of live presentations, some video, but very importantly, each of the sessions is very interactive, and the students will all be engaged with each of the educators at each of those points as we go through. We have a range of educators with all of that expertise that's needed across chemistry, biology, and mechatronic engineering, materials engineering, and the course is coordinated by Professor Michael Higgins and myself, and of course our colleagues over at AMTZ, headed up by Jitendar. But this is here's a critical aspect of the course and a critical aspect of our research. All of our projects in 3D are driven by clinicians. I highlight here the ones that we're going to be covering in the course, starting with Payal Mukherjee, an ENT surgeon who's very passionate about 3D printing ears to treat children with microtia. Peter and Claudia, equally passionate about cartilage regeneration. Toby Coates, based at Adelaide, is the clinician heading up our islet cell transplantation project. And Professor Fiona Woods at the Burns Service of Western Australia is the clinician heading up our 3D bioprinting for wound healing. So the course is fundamental, and it introduces the fundamentals of bioprinting, but introduces those in the context of the clinical challenges that are in front of us and the need to build effective collaborations to meet those challenges. And so, collaboration is key to everything that we do, whether that's in education or in research or in translation. And it's a real privilege for us to have such strong links with AMTZ and growing links with other colleagues in India. And again, a huge thank you for the opportunity to participate today. And again, congratulations on this very special day, and a special personal congratulations to Jitendar. Thank you very much.
Professor Vijay Raghavan, over to you to say a few words on what you think about the current practice and future of 3D printing, particularly bioprinting, because biology is just another baby for you, and then we will request you to commence the flyer of the course.
Well, thank you very much. It's really nice listening to Gordon Wallace and looking at your collaboration. Such collaborations are really at the heart of us as we go ahead in both countries, and indeed the collaborations between science and scientists is something which is universal and speaks a universal language. About 3D printing specifically, what I find really extraordinarily valuable is that at the core of printing are the design and the designing of what you want to print. And there is enormous scope for large scale design coming in at the finest level of architecture and planning. That's very critical. Then the actual execution, of course, is a very important part of the technology of the printing itself, what you do and what happens and so on. That's the other aspect. But this combination allows a global impact of design into local contexts wherever the printing is needed. I'm sure this will be very important. I'd like to, before just say one more thing. One of the great values in biology, for example, has been what we've learned from stem cells in labs, in culture, because they've allowed you to look at developmental mechanisms with important applications outside the animal. But those Petri dish kind of approaches have certain limitations. But with 3D printing, it is now possible to create structures which cells grow, as you've mentioned, in interesting ways, organoids, which mimic real tissue in much more fundamental ways, and therefore also mimic interactions there. So there's an enormous future there, as well as in every other example which we see. The termite hill, for example, which is constructed by termites, and you see lots of them in Australia and in India. That's an example of 3D printing. Termites secrete saliva, harden the clay, and have a design which each termite does only a small part. There's no big designer. But the termite structure which is built is an extraordinary example of how additive manufacturing can result in something truly fantastic. So there's much to learn from nature about how new forms of 3D printing are likely to come about, not just located in one place, but moving around to create extraordinary structures which could be very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. I will request the host to put up the flyer for Professor Vijay Raghavan to see it.
Jitendar, how many people will be admitted to this course? Maybe give a few.
Jordan, we are aiming about maximum 20 to 25 people because this is a very specialized course. And I must also mention here that both this talk series, the TechRx talk series, is part of the Ministry of Electronics, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India. They are completely supporting and partnering in this talk series. And the reason is Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Government of India has funded a biophysics center at AMTZ and also a center of excellence for medical electronics. So this 3D printing short course and multiple other courses would be part of the biophysics center funded by Ministry of Electronics. And the ICMR has just supported us with India's first large animal laboratory for medical devices. The large animals experiment models can actually be now done at AMTZ, and that would be the first in the country for medical devices. So when you combine this, Professor Jordan Wallace and the knowledge stream he and his colleagues bring in, the existing 3D printing center, one of largest in the world at AMTZ already existing, the new center for biophysics, and the animal lab for large animals for medical devices, I think we are looking at a very spectacular combination for science, and not just science, but science aiming for product realization. Jordan, anything additional that you want to say?
Very good, Jitendar. Just to re-emphasize, as you said, our numbers in the first go through are quite limited, 20 to 25. And the reason for that is that we want these to be as interactive as possible. We want every participant to be personally engaged with the educators. We will run this again. So if for some reason you miss out on the first go, we'll keep people's names. And but we really want to have that close personal interaction between the educators and the students, even though we're virtually connected.
Absolutely. And Professor Vijay Raghavan, as we come to the close of the first talk, I have the pleasure of informing you that Professor Jordan Wallace is the speaker next month for the TechRx talks. And last 4 months, about 3,000 people are working at AMTZ almost 20 hours a day. On this very day, any message from you, just for all of them who are behind me and in all the factories at AMTZ, all the labs in AMTZ, before we hand over to Lakshmi for the vote of thanks. But a special message for you on the Independence Day for all of us.
I've had the honor of coming to AMTZ when there was nothing and seeing it grow to what it is now. And if you had asked people, what are the chances of something like this growing at a greenfield site in that manner, most people would have said zero. What you have done is you've proven that with a sense of purpose and focus, how the impossible can actually happen in record time. So you are the real heroes, all of you, and congratulations to you. Everyone, the whole country, the whole world is proud of you, and the kinds of collaborations and interactions you're now taking with Gordon Wallace and his team will surely take the application of science and technology to our society to new heights and new disciplines. So congratulations to all of you.
Thank you, sir. I join with all my colleagues, hundreds in this room and thousands in the campus, in applauding for your mentorship and guidance.
Thank you.
And over to you, Lakshmi ji.
Thank you, everyone. I think this event itself is a great example of how science and technology and society have come together. Something someone has invented many years ago as a government project that started the internet, that has added a networking to it, connecting all of us. So someone sitting in Australia to someone sitting in Vizag to Delhi to I'm in UK, and then there are audience from all over the world watching this. So this is the power of science, scientific thinking, and of technology that can bring us all together despite all the difficulties that we are going through. This is an example of indomitable human spirit, and I really want to congratulate everyone here. Dr. Raghavan, Professor Vijay Raghavan, for your vision, your thinking, because I always say, as adults, our job is to get out of the way of young thinking. So as being part of the government and policy, to really create a structure where somebody like a Dr. Sharma can run with a lot of independence and vision is a great gift. And Dr. Sharma, to you and the 3,000 plus people who are there, thank you for putting India on the map with the most innovative thinking. And Professor Wallace, this is fantastic to bring the best of the rest of the world to India and take best of India to the rest of the world. And for all of us at Inc., our pride comes from creating a platform to bringing people like you together. And with that, I want to thank all of you. And on this Independence Day, I just want to say that the real independence we need is independence of thought. And as Tagore famously said, where the mind is without fear, into that world of freedom, let my country awaken. And so with that, I would like to wrap up by saying that this is the best example of freedom of thought, freedom of experiment. We are very, very proud to work together with all of you to start these conversations, spark the imagination of someone sitting somewhere to create something spectacular in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
In a month's time.
Thank you, sir, and Jai Hind from all of us.
Thank you all very, very much. And I'd like to just tell Lakshmi that she and you have been far too generous. All we have in Delhi done is to stay out of your way. And there she is right. All the credit goes to you. Thank you very, very much, and Jai Hind.
Thank you. Namaste.